I think one of the biggest things that I learned in the last 10 years that really made a big difference to my Bible reading was a chapter in your book, The 10 Most Misunderstood Words of the Bible, where you go over the word save or saved, salvation.
Right.
Because I tell you what, I'm sure a lot of people are like me, but when I read the Bible, if I saw the word save or salvation, I automatically thought heaven and hell. This is eternal salvation. This is salvation from hell to heaven.
Right.
But in your book, you argue actually, what is it, like 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 references?
Right. 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10.
In the New Testament.
In the New Testament. And 100% of the Old Testament.
Right.
References to salvation are actually salvation from things that actually threaten our life.
Here
in
and
this
now.
life.
Here
It's
and
like
now.
earthly
Yeah.
salvation.
Right.
And that makes a huge difference to how you read the Bible.
Well, I tell you, I was on staff with Campus Crusade for Christ for 4 years in college campus ministry, and I stumbled over a lot of the verses that use the word save and salvation because I didn't get this distinction. And it was when I went to Dallas Theological Seminary that this opened up for me. And when it opened up, it's just what you describe. All of a sudden, I was like, wow, now these passages make sense.
Well, it's like reading a new book, because Jesus, when he promised everlasting life to people, he laid out a very simple condition, which is just to believe in him.
John 3:16,
Right.
whoever believes in him.
It's just that one act of faith, and you're born again, you're given everlasting life, you're eternally secure, you'll never thirst, you'll never hunger, you'll never be lost, you'll never be cast away. It just takes a second of faith.
Right.
But then you have these other verses that seem to say, well, you need to do all kinds of things to achieve salvation. And one of those comes from Matthew chapter 24, verse 13, I think.
Right.
This is a verse that I get asked all the time.
Right.
They said, if all we need to do is to believe, then what did Jesus mean when he said, but he who endures to the end shall be saved?
Okay, well, this is part of what's called the Olivet Discourse, because Jesus was speaking on the Mount of Olives, and he was talking about the end days.
Are you saying we have to read this verse in context?
That's exactly what
Is that what you're saying?
Otherwise,
I can't just pluck it out and develop a doctrine of salvation from that?
No.
Man.
And that's what lots of people do, Sean.
Yes.
You're joking about it, but it's sad.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people have quoted this verse and said, if you don't persevere to the end of your life, then you're going to the lake of fire?
That's what they mean. They say believing is not enough. You have to endure to the end. So what you're saying is, I mean, the Olivet Discourse is one of Jesus's big sermons. Like, everyone knows the Sermon on the Mount,
right,
which is his ethical teaching.
Right.
The Olivet Discourse is his prophetic teaching.
Right. And up to verse 36, he's discussing the tribulation. And that should be a clue here,
yes,
that the end does not refer to the end of your life. It refers to the end of the tribulation, the 7-year tribulation period.
Interesting. So this means this means something quite different than what people usually make it out to be.
Right. And if you read the previous verses, you find that many are going to be offended. They're going to betray one another. They're going to hate one another. False prophets are going to arise. Lawlessness will abound, and the love of many will grow cold.
Mm-hmm.
What Jesus is saying, however, if your love doesn't grow cold and you endure to the end of the tribulation, then you're going to be saved from something.
So what is the salvation that you're going to get at the end?
Okay, the point here in 24:13, he who endures to the end of the tribulation shall be saved from the tribulation wrath. That is, they will go through it, but they will survive it. And we know that from verse 22, which is the only other use of the word save in Matthew 24. And one principle of hermeneutics or Bible interpretation is look for other uses of the same word in the same context or the same book. So what does verse 22 say, John?
And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened.
Okay, so the elect here is God's chosen people, Israel. They're the ones God chose. And if God did not cut those days short to 7 years exactly, nothing beyond, there wouldn't be a physical survivor of the tribulation. Everybody would be annihilated. Then there would be no Jews to go into the millennium in order to populate the millennium, nor would there be any Gentiles. There wouldn't be nations during the millennium. There wouldn't be, there would all be glorified people. And so what's going to happen is the believing Jews and Gentiles who survive the tribulation, who are adults, they're all going to be faithful. So when you look at the judgment of the sheep and the goats, They're all faithful, all of the sheep, all of the Gentile believers, and that's true of the Jewish believers as well. Now, I believe they'll all be glorified because they will have been faithful. And in Matthew 25, in the parable of the sheep, or the story of the sheep and the goats, the Lord says to the sheep, inherit the kingdom. And we know from 1 Corinthians 15, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom. They're going to rule with Christ, so I take it they will be glorified. Now, a lot of dispensationalists don't agree, but I would say they will be glorified, and the people who go in natural bodies will be Jewish and Gentile children under the age of accountability. I would even say believing, because they haven't had a chance to lay up eternal rewards yet. But obviously there will be great reward for the believers of the tribulation who have endured. We have, I believe there's an article by John Clace that we have on our website at faithalone.org that's very helpful there. And we have a number of books that we carry on our website that deal with that. Some of mine, some of Zane Hodges deal with this. But people can go to our website and just search this passage, and they'll find many articles dealing with this.
So enduring to the end to be saved has nothing to do with what you need to do to be born again.
No.
It's all about the tribulation. It's all about the believers going through the tribulation and the salvation that they will get from the tribulation if they're faithful.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Well,